Hey guys, welcome to BP, the Bible Perspective. We're studying the Rapture. This is part 39, along with Matthew 24 and the book of Revelation. We're studying that side by side. Now, before we get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought, a comment, add it to the comment section below, all comments. So welcome. This is part 39 of our in-depth study of eschatology, the study of end times with a focus on the rapture. So 39 videos ago, we started really unpacking the rapture of the church. And so part of why it has gone so long is that I wanted to study so as much as we can what the Bible says about prophecies. I said from the beginning, and I always say, eschatology is simple. End time prophecies is simple, along with every biblical subject. But end time prophecy is exhaustive, meaning there is a lot of verses. In other words, we should be studying all of what prophecies has to say. I think one of the biggest mistakes is people build their theology, their opinions, their views on a certain scriptures, and then they add thoughts. You put thoughts on to those scriptures to craft your theology instead of letting the scriptures speak for themselves. Now, because we're talking about the rapture of the church, where does the rapture of the church fit into biblical prophecy? First, we have to understand when we say end times, what do we mean? Well, we're talking about the end of man's time on earth as this prophecy that was given to Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel chapter 2. In fact, the entire book of Daniel, I shouldn't say the entire book, but the half of the book of Daniel from chapter 7 on is explaining this image that God had given Nebuchadnezzar. So if you want to understand Daniel, you need to understand this image right here. And it is a prophetic picture from Nebuchadnezzar's time to the end of the age, to the end of the world, which will conclude with the Jesus as pictured here, the rock obliterating this human form, human images representing 4 world dominating kingdoms. Okay, so let me also say this. Again, we've covered a lot of ground with 39 videos, and sometimes when people want to give their comments, they want to come in at the comments as if we have not did these 39 videos. Let me encourage you, look at the videos, because we cover a lot of scriptures, and partly it's because I think you need to understand when the Bible prophesies about Israel, that there are very specific prophecies of what God is going to do with the nation of Israel. And so what we're doing with this in-depth teaching is saying, okay, let's fit where the rapture of the church fits into the end time prophecies. Now, because of that, let's do a recap of our definition. So the word rapture is the Jesus removing his church. Okay, so Jesus removing his church, taking the church out of the earth. I've kind of go back, I can say here, even with this image, this prophetic image, when would Jesus remove his church? Okay, so I believe that Jesus is going to remove his church between the legs of iron, the kingdom of Rome, and the feet of iron and clay. Okay, so that's when prophetically, we'll come back to that at another time. So the rapture of the church is Jesus removing his church. There are 3 commonly held views on the rapture. Now, there are other views, but I'm going to say common because I'm going to say they are the closest to the scriptures. There is the pre tribulation view. Now, the tribulation period, and we're studying that now, is a period of time known as the Day of the Lord, the Great Tribulation. And it is this time when God is judging the earth. And it's sort of the end period. And this period, again, God is judging the earth. Now, we'll come back to that because we're actually studying that in the book of Revelations. So the tribulation period, so the biggest debate is, when does the rapture take place? So there's the pre-tribulation, meaning the rapture of the church will occur before the tribulation period begins. I hold to that view. Then there's those who believe that the rapture of the church will happen during the middle of the tribulation period. And then there are those who believe that the church won't be raptured until the end of the tribulation period, known as the post-tribulation view. Okay, so those are those are again the most commonly held views. Obviously, I disagree with the other two, but I would say this, and I say this whenever I bring this up: none of the views have a plainly stated verse as to when the rapture will take place. For example, the second coming of Jesus is clearly spelled out. We're even told when Jesus is coming, for example, immediately after the tribulation period. But we're not told, we're told the rapture is going to happen, that Jesus himself will descend from heaven and we will meet him in the air. But we're not told if it's going to happen before the tribulation period began, in the middle of the tribulation period, or at the end. None of the views have that. That's just an honest take on it. Now, I believe by circumstantial scriptural evidence, I'm making my case for the pre-tribulation period. Careful to say that I cannot tell you that there is a definite verse of scripture. So with that, as I said, let's just agree to disagree in love. Some people get very, very ungodly in disagreeing. So right now we are studying the book of Matthew 24, the chapter Matthew 24, side by side with the book of Revelation. Again, understanding clearly, plainly stated prophecies on end times. And the reason why I'm doing Matthew 24 and Revelation, the book of Revelation, because to me, the layout of the prophecies is similar. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. Now, again, we spend a lot of time on this image, so I'm not going to belabor it now. I'm just going to tell you, like I said, this is video 39. So there's a lot of ground we've covered. So let me go back to this. All right, let's bring up. I want to go back to Matthew 24. So again, so I can keep the continuity. We're actually studying, we're going to get into Revelations chapter 8. But the reason why, as I said, I wanted to study Matthew 24. So again, the thoughts go all the way back here to chapter 23, verse 37 says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. And by the way, this is Jesus' last words. You can say his last words to Jerusalem. Okay? His last words to Jerusalem. You can say that the nation to Jerusalem. He says, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, she who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together. Excuse me. As a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, yet you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. If I tell you, you will never see me again until you say, he who comes in the name of the Lord is the blessed one. And that's it. This is Jesus' last words as he's speaking pronouncement over Jerusalem. This prophecy comes to pass in AD 70. So his disciples after that, seemed like they kind of went over their head. It says and in chapter 24, verse 1 says that Jesus left and he was going out of the temple complex. His disciples came up and called his attention to the temple buildings. And then he replied, "Do you see all these things? I assure you, not one stone would be left here on one another that would not be thrown down." While he was sitting, excuse me, got a cough here. While he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, his disciples approached him privately and said, "Tell us, when will these things happen, and what is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" So these three questions Jesus is going to answer. I'm going to skip down in verse 9 because, again, he talks about what will happen to the disciples. I'm going to condense this, okay, but also the church age. So he says, then they will hand you over for persecution. They will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. Many will take offense and betray one another and hate one another. And many false prophets will arise and deceive many, because lawlessness will multiply. The love of many will grow cold, but the one who endures to the end will be delivered. If we read the King James, saved. He says, this good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed in all the world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Now keep that in mind. He says that the good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed, notice this, one, in all the world. Now watch this, not to Jerusalem, or not to Jerusalem only, but to all the world. Now let me come down because it's important. I think I want to keep this in continuity. When we talk about the world, this is a prophetic picture of the world, the time of the world, what is going on in the world. Okay, this is God's prophetic prophetic picture of the world to the end of the world or the age. Okay, all right, so that's the picture of it. This is what's going to happen until Jesus comes. Okay, so if you were standing back in Nebuchadnezzar's time, which is around 590 BC, you would have the kingdom of Babylon, you would have the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians, and then you have the ancient kingdom, Grecian kingdom, and then you would have the Roman kingdom. Now the Roman kingdom brings us up to Jesus, the very crucifixion of Jesus, where he's cut off. And really prophetically, we have a gap. In other words, you can see one succession after the other. And then when we come to this, there's a gap. We know this because the feet of iron and clay, which is 10 nations, which we will get to in the book of Revelation, hasn't risen yet. But then he says, this is what Daniel interpret this dream here to Nebuchadnezzar. He says, in the days of these kingdoms, Jesus would set up his everlasting kingdom. So right now we're waiting for the feet of iron and clay to emerge. It hasn't yet. Okay, and that's important because also when you go into Daniel chapter 9, I think it's important for the language sake. There were 70 weeks there was the 70-week prophecy, a week representing 7 years. That in the 69th week, the Messiah will be cut off, but then we see a gap between week 69 and then week 70. I will say this, prophetically, we still are between week 69 and week 70. In other words, week 70 hasn't happened. How do we know? Let's go back to again, Jesus' prophecies here. Okay, so when he says, verse 14, this good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed in all the world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So a few videos back, I asked the question, and we went into this in great detail. What is going on right now with this good news? Remember, we also went to Acts chapter 1 when they asked Jesus, are you restoring the kingdom of Israel? That's worth us looking at. Let's do that. And then I'm going to come back to Revelations. I'm doing this now as a refresher so that we can keep the continuity. Oh, here I am. Oh, even better. Okay, so the Acts of the Apostle, Jesus, and this is the first chapter as Jesus is getting ready to ascend into heaven. Okay, he's getting ready to ascend to heaven. I don't want. I gotta change my translation. I read from the Holman Christian Standard. I love this translation here. I think it's one of the better translations. And people have their favorites. The Holman Christian Standard is mine. So, okay. So, in verse 6, this is important as we're studying that. Remember in Matthew 24, Jesus makes the statement, right? He makes the statement. He says to Jerusalem, "You will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Well, look at verse 6. Now remember, that was probably a week before his death, and now these are some days, about 40 days after his resurrection. He's getting ready to ascend into heaven. They asked him this question. So when they had come together, they asked him, "Lord, are you restoring the kingdom to Israel at this time?" Okay, I'm taking a drink of water here. Okay, so he asked him that question, right? Okay, so notice his answer. So remember this here. So remember this thing here. This good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed in all the world and the testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So now they're asking him, are you restoring the kingdom of Israel at this time? Now, if I want to be kind of a little comedic here, Jesus could have answered him, has Jerusalem said, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord? Right? He said, oh, I hear him say that. No, he didn't. Of course, he didn't say that. Now, verse 7, he said, it is not for you to know the times or the periods that the Father set by his own authority. So he doesn't answer them. In a sense, he's already answered it like from 50 days before. But he says, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in Jerusalem and in Judea and in Samaria and to the ends of the earth. Now, so then what is this witness part? And I said, we talked about it before, that during this time, this is the church age. God is gathering a family. That's what he's doing here. Okay, and then when that time is up, then as we're going to see here in Matthew 24, he says this good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed in all the world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Now in verse 15, he switches thought. He says, so, verse 15, when you see the abomination. Now remember that phrase? Remember what he says to them? Now, of course, we're flipping back and forth in time. So this is actually before Acts 1. So when you see the abomination that caused desolation. Now remember, they ask him, are you restoring the kingdom at this time? Not for you to know, he says, not for you to know the times and the periods. However, what does he say? When you see the abomination that causes desolation, spoken by the prophet Daniel, standing in the holy place. Now, you have to go to the book of Daniel, which we have. Go to the book of Daniel, chapter 9, and also Daniel, chapter 12. This phrase is, Jesus is citing this phrase here. You also have to go back in the 70-week prophecy that says 70 weeks are determined for your people, your city, and the holy temple. Your people, the holy city, and the temple. The 70 weeks. This is when he says that the prince of the coming people will make a covenant with the people for 1 week. And remember, a week is a 7-year period of time. There were 70 weeks, 490 weeks prophecy. So 70 weeks, the 70th week, that last week is when this abomination that causes desolation to occur. Something else happens during this 70th week. He makes a covenant and then he breaks the covenant in the middle of the week. All right. So he says, so when you see the abomination that causes desolation spoken by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then those in Judea. Now let's go back for a moment. Look at verse 14 again. This good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed in all the world as a testimony to all nations. Now, he says, when you see the abomination that caused desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet. Now, who is he talking to? He's talking to the Jews. He's talking to Peter, talking to the disciples, the Jews. When you see the abomination that caused desolation spoken by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. So in order to understand this, you got to go to Daniel chapter 9 and Daniel chapter 12. But notice this, those in Judea. So he's not talking about the world. He's not talking to these group of people here where the good news is being spread all over the world. He's talking to the people now who are in Judea. He says, must flee to the mountains. A man on a housetop must not come down to get his things out of the house. Now, and also, Zechariah chapter 12 tells us that other Old Testament prophecies prophesied by the Old Testament prophets tell us of these days concerning Israel. Right? A man in the field must not go back to get his clothes. Woe to the pregnant women and nursing mothers in those days. Pray that your escape may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. So again, he's not talking to these people here for being who's proclaiming the good news in all the kingdom. By the way, these people who are already suffering persecution, who would be hated by all men by the for Jesus' name. No mention of the Sabbath day, keeping the Sabbath day, fleeing to Judea or the mountains of Judea. You know where else this is spoken of? In Zechariah, when it talks about the Lord will come, the mountain will split, and then you will escape through the mountain. Verse 19, woe to the pregnant women and nursing mothers in those days. Pray that your escape may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. Verse 21, for at that time there will be great tribulation. And unless those days were limited, no one will survive, but those days will be limited because of the elect. Notice he says, then the beginning of the world, okay, there'll be great tribulation. So that's what we're talking about right here. The term tribulation corresponds to the day of the Lord. Now I'm going to go to Revelation. Every now and then I want to keep the continuity of thought. Now again, I'm studying Revelation and Matthew 24 side by side because, to me, the layout of the prophecies is similar. So in the book of Revelation, we see that the Apostle John is given this revelation by Jesus to the 7 churches of Asia Minor at the time. And you see the first part. And it is interesting that the last prophecy or prophecy that Jesus is speaking to the church is a warning, an exhortation, and a comfort to 7 different kinds of churches. A warning to the bad churches, a comfort to those that are doing good, an exhortation, or a comfort to those that are in tribulation, and an exhortation to those that are doing good. 7 different churches he's speaking to. We studied this. Like I say, this is video 39. So then we said, when we come to chapter 4, after this, he says, after this, I looked. Now, after what? After the prophecies of the messages to the 7 churches. After this, after Jesus gave the prophecy, I looked, and there in heaven was an open door, and the first voice that I heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." Right? So after this, the two after this, right? What must take place after this? So we see that there's a we are transported to a scene in heaven, the glory of God being manifested. And then when we get to chapter 5, we see that the Lamb, Jesus, is given a scroll that is bound by 7 seals. Some people would say that this kind of is an image of a kind of a legal document, like a title deed. Okay, not going to linger there too long on that. But the 7 seals, and notice it is Jesus who has the 7 seals. And then as we get into chapter 6, we see that each of the 7 seals, each seal is a judgment unleashed by Jesus. Okay. So then we came to chapter 7, and he says, after this, right, after the leasing of the 7, of the, actually the 6 seals, okay, and then you see that there were 144,000 Israelites sealed. Now, what is one of the most amazing things, and you can see how cult works. Okay, just kind of a little sidebar here. You can see how cult works, because Jehovah Witnesses use this passage, this very passage, to say that there's a heavenly class of Jehovah Witnesses, which is kind of interesting, because when they started in the late 18th century, there wasn't 144,000. They kind of thought they were the only ones who were going to go, and as their numbers grew, and I believe there's somewhere between 6 and 8 million people worldwide today, a lot more than 144,000. So they had to come up with 144,000 are the chosen people, special people. Then the rest who were faithful will live on earth. So not a bad deal for those who live on earth. A better deal if you are one of the 144,000. And one day I'll tell you about how I personally met one of the 144,000. I kid you not. I have met one of the 144,000. But at another time. So anyway, the reason why I wanted to kind of just bring that up is how blind people could willfully blind themselves, because you can, if you read this, there's no way where it says any kind of way that this is the 144,000 Jehovah Witnesses. In other words, the Jehovah Witnesses do not claim to be Jews, and yet, they said that the 144,000 here are Jehovah Witnesses. And it clearly states Israelites, 12,000 from each of the tribes, 12 tribes of Israel. Okay? And then we saw a vast multitude of people that were standing before the throne. And then one of the 24 elders asked John. Now remember, he's in the vision. He's in heaven. You could probably even say maybe like Paul, whether in the body, out of body. He says, I don't know, but this is such a powerful image, right? And so the angels asked him, verse 13. I'll pick it up here and just move on. And then one of the elders asked me, who are these people robed in white, and where did they come from? I said to him, sir, you know. We're going to see these exchanges throughout Revelation. This is kind of God's MO, one of his MO. He will ask us questions. He will always, that's things like, well, and he said, like, right? Then he told me, these are the one coming out of the Great Tribulation. Now, again, these group of people here, although they are identified as within the Great Tribulation period. Now remember, the tribulation period is also known as the day of the Lord, the period of time that God is pouring out his wrath. Okay? The period of time that God is pouring out his wrath. Okay? And the reason why I say that is because when we're talking about the rapture, that there are those who believe that the church is going to go through the tribulation period, either halfway through it or all the way through it. And then I said, why do we need to go through the tribulation period? Because it is a period of time where God is pouring out wrath. This is the purpose of the tribulation period. Now, there are groups of people who were doing this time come to the Lord. Okay? And so when he asks, these are the ones, and the answer, these are the ones coming out of Great Tribulation. They've washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. For this reason, they are before the throne of God, and they serve him day and night in his sanctuary. So remember I said too, we have to, I always like to look at details because the details are given specifically for specific purposes. So does this describe the church? Now this church, which is, you go back to chapters 2 and 3, actually it's chapters 1, 2, and 3. The word church is used there, but then the word church is not used from that from chapters 4 all the way really to the end of the book of Revelations. The letter itself, in other words, the revelation, is written to those 7 churches. But you see the first 3 chapters, that is the message directed to the church. They're called out by name. And then after chapter 4, we're not mentioning the church. We also know, so the church is defined as the body of Christ. So now the question is, are these people the body of Christ? Because notice he said they serve him. And by the way, the sanctuary is the church. That's the first thing. The other thing is, we are sons of God. Okay. And when I said that what God was doing prior to this period of time, gathering his church, and one of the things that Ephesians 2 tells us, we are being built at a sanctuary for God to dwell in. I think details are important. So look at this, verse 15. For this reason, they are before the throne of God. And by the way, so this group comes out of this vast, innumerable group from every nation, tribe, people, language, right? Comes. This is during this period of time. Now, if you also remember, we in the 6 seals that are unleashed, that if we go by the population rate today, which is about 8 billion people, remember a fourth from the seals, 6 seals, a fourth of people will be killed, which is what, about 2 billion people. So at this point, then let's put it like this: we're going to say that we're kind of down to 6 billion people. All right, we are running. We're going to keep tab on that. So verse 15 says, "For this reason they are before the throne of God, and they serve him day and night in the sanctuary. And the one seated on the throne will shelter them, and they will no longer hunger. They will no longer thirst, and the sun will no longer strike them, nor will any heat, for the Lamb who within the center of the throne will shepherd them, and he will guide them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes." And there's a couple of ways to me to look at that God would wipe away every tear from their eyes. It could be tears of joy, right? Happiness to be out of the Great Tribulation. It could also be tears of remorse. I believe that we're going to have some type of sorrow because, you know, all of us probably could to one degree or another say, you know, we failed God in our life. Now, the good news about that is that our salvation is not based upon uh, our salvation is not based upon God. And I want to say that when I to that, let me show you just a quick verse in Colossians chapter 1. And it says here, verse 21, this is Colossians chapter 1, verse 21 says, once you were alienated and hostile in your minds because of your evil actions. But now he, meaning Jesus, has reconciled you by his physical body through his death to present you holy, faultless, and blameless before him, if indeed you remain grounded and steadfast in your faith and not shift away from the hope of the gospel which you've heard. Now, notice, God, before God, God sees us blameless, holy, and faultless. Why? Through the Jesus' physical body, his death. That's not going to stop, in my opinion, though. That's not going to stop us in our consciousness, right? That we know we fail God. But notice it, God will wipe away every tear from our eyes. All right, now, chapter 8. He says, and when he opened the seventh seal, now remember, up until this point, he has unleashed 6 seals. And so now what we're going to see is he's going to open the seventh seal. That's going to unfold unto another set of judgments. So he said, when he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour. That's kind of interesting when I see this. A half an hour. Was it really a half an hour? In other words, is there really a clock in heaven? Or are we given this sort of, and I don't think there is a sense of time. However, he said a half an hour, right? So, okay. Verse 2, then I saw 7 angels who stand in the presence of God. 7 trumpets were given to them. So now the 7th seal is a judgment of 7 trumpets. Okay. Now remember I said each set of judgments. And by the way, remember Jesus is the one that's dealing out the judgment here. And I say that because quickly, if you go back to chapter 6, some people try to read sort of natural occurrences in with these judgments right here, but they're not. Remember, each judgment was a Jesus was doing that. Let me say just one other thing too. Right here, this is chapter 6. And verse 15 says, the kings of the earth, the nobles, the military commanders, and rich, the powerful, and every slave and the free person hid in the caves and among the rocks in the mountains. Now we see that phrase throughout the Old Testament prophecies. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne, from the wrath of the Lamb, because the great day of their wrath has come. And he was able to stand. Okay. Now, the reason why I say that, I kind of read that because as we move forward, we're going to see we're going to see the hardness of sin that's going to get harder and harder. They're not going to be as repentive and fearful. So again, so chapter 8 says, and when he opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour. And then I saw 7 angels who stand in the presence of God. 7 trumpets were given to them. Another angel with a gold incense burner came and stood at the altar, and he was given a large amount of incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the gold altar in front of the throne. Now, we see this picture, a very interesting picture here of the prayers of the saints. And I guess it should be an encouragement to us about prayers, that the prayers are answered. But I guess the prayers are heard. The word saints is a very interesting word, because if you come from a Catholic tradition, they have, to me, so distorted the word saint. The word saint, okay, it actually comes from the same family of words as saint, sanctify, sanctification. The idea is set apart, and it's referring to people who are set apart. So it's in no way is the definition of saints referring to people who have achieved sort of this super duper extra good honor to be called saints. That is a gross distortion. Anyone in Christ is a saint because they are set apart by God unto himself. So when he says right here, he would give the large amount of incense to offer the prayers of all the saints on the gold altar in front of the throne, right? So verse 4, the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up in the presence of God from the angel's hand. Now, let me also say this about the angels. I mean, the prayers too. This kind of scene here is awesome, right? This kind of scene is a very awesome scene that that as the prayers of the saints went up before God in the presence of God, that God is aware of us. Now, also, one of the things that we'll see this later, from God's perspective, how he looks at life. I say that because we grieve at death, right? And should, I mean, it's natural, right? I mean, it's, the instinct to shy away to avoid death, right? But understand, from God's perspective, when you die, you're with him. When your loved one dies, they are with him. And let's be careful about ascribing stuff in heaven that we don't know. Like, for example, remember, this group of people that we're seeing here are not your loved ones who have already died in the Lord. Now, that's a whole other group of people. My point is, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in heaven that God hasn't revealed. In other words, this revelation here is for our benefit for end times, but there's a whole lot of stuff going on in heaven that, when we get there, to me, when we get to heaven, there will not be a dull moment. You always hear that, and you hear sometimes sinners saying that I'd rather go to hell and then they go to heaven, because heaven's such a dull place, and they go to hell. Well, obviously the gross distortion about that is hell is not a place of partying with your friends. One of the other sad things about suicide to me is what they think when you take your own life, what people think is going to meet them on the other side. All right, verse 5 says, the angel took the incense burner, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it to the earth. And there were rumblings, thunders, flashes of lightning, and earthquake. And the seventh angel, who had the seven trumpets, prepared to blow them. So now you got seven angels, which is a part of the seventh seal, judgment. Verse 7 says, the first angel blew his trumpet. Hail and fire mixed with blood was hurled to the earth. So a third of the earth was burnt up. A third of the trees were burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up. Now, it's interesting. Later, we're going to get in that we're focusing on the judgments, but remember, while this is happening, there is a kingdom, a wicked kingdom going on. So we get to that later, though. So a third. Now, another thing to remember is that this is not, again, natural occurring. Like, for example, when we look at the news, and pretty much almost every weekend, we're looking at some kind of natural weather occurrence, tornadoes, floods, right? But understand that this is not a natural occurring thing. It is controlled. A third, right, of the earth was burned up. A third of the trees were burnt up, and then all of the green grass were burned up. So you look at all of your pictures of the nice greenery, burnt up. Verse 8, the second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a great mountain ablaze with fire was hurled into the sea. So a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. So kind of the picture here, a third. Understand, so far we're looking at a third. We're looking at this, what all of these occurrences thus far. It's a third. Obviously, too, you can also look at the judgments that were poured out on Egypt that were similar. And I'm going to say similar because they're not the same. Verse 10 says, a third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from heaven. It fell on a third of the rivers and springs of water. Now, it's kind of interesting. He mentions the springs of water. Rivers and lakes and oceans, or what is called surface waters. When you get into the springs of the water, so a lot of times on land, when you look at all of the land, sometimes depending on what's called underground water springs, water levels, water tables. A lot of you all may not realize that your city use well water that they dig down 30 feet, sometimes 50 feet. Some wells can even go a little further, and then they pump water up, okay? These underground aquifers, okay? So when he says, so now he's talking about even that would be contaminated. The surface water, the naturally can contaminated. But notice that the springs of waters. He says, the name of the star is wormwood, and a third of the waters became wormwood. So many people died from the waters because they had been made bitter. So this star. Now, what this star could be, we don't know. You know, what's kind of interesting that if John was writing this today, what language would he use, right? A meteorite, right, or something? Meteor or something? Who knows? Verse 12, he said, the fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, a third of the stars, so that the third of them were darkened. A third of the day was without light, and the night as well. And I looked again and heard an angel flying overhead, crying out with a loud voice, woe, woe, woe to those who live on the earth because of the remaining trumpet blast that the three angels are about to sound. Now, the word woe always is bad. Somebody go, woe is you, that's bad, right? So now, when this fourth angel blew, notice it says that a third of the night, a third of the stars, So some kind of way there's going to be some kind of atmospheres, right? A third of it's going to be darkened. A third of the day will be without light as well. So again, it's going to be affected by that. So again, we can see that each judgment, that we know that this is not natural occurring, that it is a judgment because God is the one who is, again, doing this. And in each case, there is a very um, precise number, specific occurrence to it. Okay? But this is, again, this is God. This is the day of the Lord. It's the Great Tribulation. So while earth is still happening, we haven't got to that yet. We will get to it, but this is what's going on. And in some respect, I oftentimes think that, and we're going to get to the man of sin, that he will not enjoy his reign of wickedness. All right, guys, we're going to pick this up, obviously, in part 40 of the Rapture, studying Matthew 24 and the book of Revelation side by side. Now, if you have, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. And I do mean that, all comments are welcome. But be godly. Let's go back and forth, and let's dialogue in a godly way. But nevertheless, your comments are still welcome. All right, I'll see you in the next video.